They told you the Sphinx was built by the Egyptians. They were lying. Not entirely, maybe, but lying by omission. Lying by leaving out the parts that don't fit. The parts that make experts uncomfortable. The parts that would force us to rewrite everything we think we know about human history. You've seen the Sphinx. Everyone has. That massive lion with a human head sitting in the desert outside Cairo. You've been told it was carved around 2500 BC by Pharaoh Khafre during Egypt's Old Kingdom. You've been told the face is his face. You've been told it's about 4,500 years old. And for most of your life, you probably believed that story without question. But here's what they don't tell you. The Sphinx shows signs of water erosion. Deep, vertical erosion patterns that could only have been caused by thousands of years of heavy rainfall. And here's the problem with that. The last time the Giza Plateau experienced that kind of sustained rainfall was over 7,000 years ago. Some geologists say closer to 10,000 years ago. Long before the pharaohs. Long before dynastic Egypt even existed. Long before the pyramids were supposedly built. If this changes everything you thought you knew about ancient history, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what comes next is going to completely shatter the timeline you learned in school. Think about what that means for a second. If the Sphinx was carved when mainstream Egyptology says it was, it should show wind erosion, sand erosion, the kind of weathering you'd expect from 4,500 years in a desert climate. And it does show some of that, but it also shows something else, something that shouldn't be there. Water damage, lots of it. In the 1990s, a geologist named Robert Schoch examined the Sphinx enclosure. Not an Egyptologist, a geologist, someone who reads rocks for a living. And what he found disturbed him. The limestone walls surrounding the Sphinx displayed deep, undulating erosion patterns. These patterns were vertical, not horizontal. They went deep into the rock. And according to basic geology, this type of erosion is caused by prolonged exposure to running water and rainfall. Schoch presented his findings. He showed his evidence. He explained the science. And the Egyptology establishment lost their minds. They attacked him. They dismissed him. They said he didn't understand Egyptian history. But here's the thing. He wasn't making historical claims. He was reading the rocks. And the rocks don't lie. The rocks tell a story that Egyptology doesn't want to hear. A story that suggests the Sphinx is far, far older than we've been taught. A story that implies there was an advanced civilization capable of monumental construction thousands of years before we thought civilization even existed. So who really built the Sphinx? And why has the truth been buried for so long? Let's start with what we know for certain. The Sphinx is massive, 240 feet long, 66 feet high, carved from a single ridge of limestone. It's not built from blocks like the pyramids. It was carved directly out of the bedrock. Whoever made it didn't bring stones from somewhere else. They found a natural limestone formation and carved a lion out of it. Now, according to mainstream Egyptology, Pharaoh Khafre ordered the construction of the Sphinx around 2500 BC. The evidence for this? Mostly circumstantial. The Sphinx sits near Khafre's pyramid. Some researchers think the face resembles Khafre. There's a small temple nearby that contains a statue of Khafre. That's it. That's the evidence. No inscriptions on the Sphinx itself. No records from Khafre's time claiming he built it. No contemporary documents describing its construction. Nothing. The attribution to Khafre is based entirely on proximity and assumption. But here's where it gets interesting. There's an ancient Egyptian document called the Inventory Stela. It was discovered in the 1800s near the Great Pyramid. And what this stela says is explosive. It describes Khufu, the pharaoh who supposedly built the Great Pyramid, discovering the Sphinx already buried in sand. It says he excavated it. He didn't build it. He found it. Mainstream Egyptology dismisses the inventory stela. They say it's a later forgery, written thousands of years after Khufu's reign. They say it's not reliable. But notice what they're doing. They're dismissing a primary source document because it contradicts their narrative. They're choosing to ignore evidence that doesn't fit. And this is a pattern. Throughout the history of archaeology, evidence that challenges the established timeline gets dismissed, ignored, or explained away. Not because it's bad evidence, but because it's inconvenient evidence. So let's go back to the water erosion, because this is where the whole story falls apart. The Sphinx sits in an enclosure, a rectangular pit carved into the limestone plateau. When they carved the Sphinx out of the bedrock, they had to dig down, creating walls around it. And those walls, they tell a story that defies the official timeline. Robert Schoch spent years examining those walls. He compared the erosion on the Sphinx enclosure to erosion on nearby structures that we know the dates of. Tombs cut into rock during the Old Kingdom, temples built during later periods. And what he found was undeniable. The erosion on the Sphinx enclosure was fundamentally different. The Old Kingdom tombs showed horizontal weathering, wind damage, sand abrasion, exactly what you'd expect from thousands of years in the desert. But the Sphinx enclosure showed deep vertical channels, smooth undulating surfaces, and precipitation-induced weathering. The kind of weathering that takes thousands of years of rainfall to create. Schoch consulted with other geologists, not Egyptologists, not archaeologists, geologists, scientists who study erosion for a living. And they agreed with his assessment. Based purely on the geological evidence, the Sphinx enclosure appeared to have been carved between 7,000 and 9,000 BC, maybe earlier. Think about what that means. 7,000 BC. That's over 9,000 years ago. That's before the invention of writing. Before agriculture in most of the world. Before anything we recognize as civilization, at least according to the history books. But if the Sphinx was carved that long ago, then someone was in Egypt with the knowledge, the organization, and the technology to undertake massive construction projects thousands of years before we thought such things were possible. Someone we don't have a name for. Someone history forgot. The establishment fought back hard against Schoch's findings. Egyptologists argued that the erosion could be explained by other factors. Groundwater, dew, chemical processes, anything but rain. Because admitting it was rain erosion would mean admitting the Sphinx predates Egyptian civilization. And that would unravel everything. But geology doesn't care about historical narratives. Geology is evidence. And the evidence points to water, lots of it, sustained rainfall over thousands of years, the kind of climate the Giza Plateau hasn't experienced since the end of the last ice age. Now let's talk about the head, because the head of the Sphinx creates another massive problem for the official story. Look at it, really look at it. The head is tiny compared to the body, disproportionately small. It doesn't match. Any sculptor, ancient or modern, would notice this immediately. The proportions are wrong. Why? The most likely explanation is that the head was recarved. The original Sphinx probably had a lion's head, proportional to its body. Later, perhaps during the time of the pharaohs, someone carved it down into a human head, probably to make it look like a pharaoh. This would explain why the head is so small. They were working with what was left after thousands of years of erosion had worn away the original. If you recarve a weathered lion's head into a human head, you have to remove a lot of material. The head gets smaller, the proportions get distorted. And that's exactly what we see. The Sphinx has the body of a lion and a head that looks like it was added later, carved from what remained of something much larger. This isn't just speculation. Forensic analysis of the head shows it's less weathered than the body. It's also made of harder limestone. Why? Because when you recarve something, you go deeper into the rock. You cut away the weathered outer layers and expose fresher stone underneath. The head looks newer because it is newer. Not new, but newer than the body. So we're looking at a monument that was built in stages, an original structure, possibly 9,000 years old or more, with a lion's head. Then later, after thousands of years of weathering, someone recarved the head into human form. Probably the Egyptians. Probably around the time they built the pyramids. They didn't build the Sphinx. They renovated it. They claimed it. They made it theirs. But who built it originally? That's the question that changes everything. Because whoever built the original Sphinx had capabilities that aren't supposed to exist in the historical record. Not yet. Not that early. Someone was carving monuments out of solid bedrock while the rest of humanity was supposedly living in caves and hunting with stone tools. There's another clue hidden in plain sight. Seismic surveys conducted around the Sphinx in the 1990s revealed something shocking. Underground chambers, cavities beneath and around the Sphinx that show evidence of artificial construction. Rooms, tunnels, passages. There's something under there, something that's been deliberately sealed off. Egyptian authorities won't allow excavation. They won't allow ground-penetrating radar anymore. They've shut down investigations. Why? If these are just natural caves or empty spaces, why not prove it? Why not dig them up and show the world there's nothing there? Unless there is something there, something they don't want found. Ancient Egyptian texts talk about a hall of records beneath the Sphinx, a chamber containing knowledge from a civilization that existed before Egypt, before the flood, before recorded history. The texts say this knowledge was preserved by survivors of a great cataclysm, hidden beneath the lion, waiting to be rediscovered. Mainstream Egyptology dismisses these texts as mythology, legend, fantasy. But what if they're not? What if they're descriptions of something real, written in the only language available at the time? What if there really is a chamber down there, sealed thousands of years ago, containing evidence of who built the Sphinx and why? We can't know, because we're not allowed to look. The Egyptian government, under pressure from orthodox Egyptologists, has forbidden further investigation. The seismic anomalies remain unexplored. The chambers, if they exist, stay sealed. The truth stays buried. And that brings us to the real question. Why? Why is there so much resistance to investigating the Sphinx properly? Why do Egyptologists become hostile when geologists present evidence of greater age? Why are obvious questions dismissed as pseudoscience? Why is curiosity treated as heresy? Because the implications are terrifying. Not physically terrifying, intellectually terrifying. If the Sphinx is 9,000 years old, then everything we've been taught about the rise of civilization is wrong. The timeline collapses. History has to be rewritten, and institutions built on that history lose their authority. Think about what's at stake. Universities teach Egyptian history based on the current timeline. Textbooks are written, careers are built, reputations are established. Entire academic departments exist to study and preserve the accepted narrative. If that narrative is fundamentally wrong, all of it comes crashing down. So they protect it, they defend it, they attack anyone who questions it, not because the evidence supports them, but because admitting they're wrong would be devastating. It would mean decades of scholarship were based on false assumptions. It would mean they missed something massive, something obvious, and it would mean something even more disturbing. It would mean there was a civilization before Egypt, before Sumer, before any of the cultures we call the first civilizations. A civilization advanced enough to move massive stones, carve bedrock monuments, and preserve knowledge through cataclysmic climate change. A civilization that history forgot, or maybe didn't forget, maybe erased. There are myths from all over the world describing advanced civilizations destroyed by floods, earthquakes, and cosmic disasters. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. We call them legends. We say they're just stories, but what if they're memories? What if they're fragmented histories of real places, real people, real events passed down through thousands of years until they became myths? Plato described Atlantis as existing 9,000 years before his time. That puts it around 11,000 years ago, right at the end of the last ice age, right when global sea levels rose by over 300 feet, drowning coastlines worldwide. Right when the climate of North Africa was shifting from wet to dry. Right when, according to geology, the Sphinx might have been carved. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Plato was preserving a real memory. A memory of a civilization that existed when the Sphinx was young. A civilization that built monuments we're still trying to understand. A civilization that vanished when the world changed, leaving only ruins and myths behind. The Younger Dryas period, roughly 12,000 years ago, was a time of massive global catastrophe. Rapid climate change, massive flooding, extinction events. Species that had survived for millions of years disappeared almost overnight. And right after this period, something strange happens in the archaeological record. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey appears. A massive stone temple complex built by people who supposedly didn't have agriculture, cities, or organized religion. It predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the pyramids by 7,000 years. And it shows evidence of astronomical knowledge and advanced engineering. The Sphinx might be part of the same story, part of a forgotten chapter of human history that conventional academia refuses to acknowledge. A chapter where civilization didn't begin in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. It began much earlier, was destroyed, and had to start over. The survivors of that destruction scattered. Some went to Turkey and built Göbekli Tepe. Some went to Egypt and carved the Sphinx. Some went to South America and built structures like Pumapunku and Tiwanaku, which also show signs of being far older than official dates suggest. They spread across the world, carrying fragments of knowledge, trying to preserve what they could. And over thousands of years, their story became myth. Their history became legend. Their technology was forgotten. Their monuments were claimed by later cultures who found them, renovated them, and said, "We built this." And eventually, the original builders disappeared entirely from the record. Until we started looking at the rocks, until we started asking questions, until we stopped accepting the official story and started demanding evidence. The Sphinx has a secret. It's written in the erosion patterns on its walls. It's hidden in the disproportionate size of its head. It's buried in the sealed chambers beneath its paws. It's encoded in myths about lost civilizations and halls of records. The secret is this: history is wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. The story we've been told about human civilization, the neat, linear progression from primitive to advanced, from stone tools to cities to empires, it's incomplete. There were others before us. Others who built in stone because they knew stone would last. Others who aligned their monuments to the stars because they understood the sky. Others who left clues, hoping we'd eventually be smart enough to find them. And we're finding them. Not in universities, not in mainstream archaeology, in independent research, in geological analysis, in the work of people willing to ask uncomfortable questions and follow evidence wherever it leads. The truth is emerging, slowly, against resistance, but emerging nonetheless. The Sphinx wasn't built by Khafre. It might not even have been built by anyone we have a name for. It was carved from bedrock thousands of years before dynastic Egypt existed. It witnessed the end of the Ice Age. It watched as the rains stopped and the desert formed. It sat half buried in sand, while new civilizations rose and fell around it. And when the Egyptians found it, they claimed it. They carved a pharaoh's face onto it. They built temples around it. They made it part of their story. But it's not their story. It's older. Much older. And the people who built it, they're not in our history books. They don't have names. They don't have a Wikipedia page. They existed in the gap, the blank space in human history between the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of recorded civilization. The period we're told was empty. The period that turns out to have been full of activity we're only now beginning to understand. Look at the Sphinx again, not as a monument to a pharaoh, but as a time capsule, a message carved in stone, a marker left by people who knew the world was changing, who knew their civilization was ending, who carved a lion out of bedrock hoping it would survive long enough for someone to find it, someone to ask questions, someone to dig deeper, someone to realize we're not the first, we're just the latest. The establishment won't tell you this. They can't. Because admitting it means admitting they've been wrong for over a century. It means admitting that everything they've taught, everything they've written, everything their careers are built on, is based on a timeline that doesn't match the physical evidence. So they'll keep fighting. They'll keep dismissing geologists. They'll keep blocking excavation. They'll keep calling anyone who questions the official story a pseudoscientist or a conspiracy theorist. They'll keep protecting their narrative, because that narrative is all they have. Without it, they're just people who spent their entire lives studying a lie. But the rocks don't lie. The erosion patterns don't lie. The sealed chambers don't lie. The disproportionate head doesn't lie. The inventory stela doesn't lie. The global myths don't lie. The evidence is there. All of it. Waiting. Pointing to a truth that rewrites human history. Someone built the Sphinx before Egypt existed. Someone with knowledge we're told didn't exist yet. Someone who's been erased from history. Someone who left one message in stone, hoping we'd be brave enough to read it. And that message is simple. You're not the beginning. You're the continuation. There were others before you. They built. They knew. They tried to preserve what they could. And now it's your turn to remember. Are you ready to remember? Are you ready to accept that history is bigger, stranger, and more mysterious than you were taught? Are you ready to look at the Sphinx and see what it really is? Not a monument to a pharaoh, but evidence. Evidence of something we lost, something we forgot. Something that's been waiting in the desert for thousands of years, ready to tell its story to anyone willing to listen. The truth has been buried long enough. It's time we started digging.